welcome to the first episode of DFS Podcast. I am your host, Vector, and I am co-hosting here with...
My name is Lynn. You might know me as SKJC on Discord or Twitter.
Welcome, Lynn. I'm glad to get this going. Been a work in progress here for a while now. Trials and tribulations of finding a co-host and getting things going with it, and so I'm glad to have you. We put a lot of prep and time and effort into this and excited to just keep going with it. I am a toffee as far as supporters go. I do follow a lot of leagues, a lot of clubs and whatnot, but my main love and first love in the world of soccer is Everton. What about you?
Supporter of my local NWSL club, the Orlando Pride. I've been a season ticket holder with them for several seasons back to about 2016. Across the pond in the English FAWSL, I'm a big supporter of the Chelsea women, and down under in Australia's W League, I support Canberra United in green.
Canberra United, interesting. Okay. I actually had not known that until this moment, so that's a surprise there for me there, but hey, I'll take it. We are going to be doing... just general football podcasts, general discussions over, what's going on throughout the world of football, which we will be calling football. We will call it soccer. We will say footy. It's just how it is. Living in America, you kind of can call it anything, truthfully, and it's pretty acceptable. People know mostly what you're talking about. So if you dislike that fact, if you hate it, want to call us out on it, follow us on Twitter, DFS Pod. And let us know that you don't like it, but we're okay with that because no press is bad press, It just increases those engagements on her tweets. We also will be having guests from time to time. This first episode is going to be guest-free, but we will have people from all over the football world fandom as far as just fans go, other hosts of football podcasts, people that work with clubs, and hopefully some players eventually here, so... We're excited to kind of get this going. Today's episode, we're just going to be talking about some of the European Champions League, the European Europa League, a little bit of the Women's Cup, and some CONCACAF topics here. But further episodes will be about many, many things. Anything world football that's worth talking about and big in the news, we're gonna really bring up. So I'm pretty excited to be able to bring this to you guys. First topic for the day, though, these big news on the UEFA sanctions against the clubs that joined the ESL. AP News Relief, the 9 clubs are going to be making a combined payment of 15 million euros for what the UEFA calls a gesture of goodwill to benefit children, youth, and grassroots football, along with giving up 5% of their revenue for one season playing in Europe. A little bit surprising in the sense of I feel like a little bit more of a slap on the wrist compared to the total revenues of some of these clubs. What were your thoughts on that there, Lynn?
I definitely think it is a slap on the wrist. It's meant to kind of placate the people that are upset without causing too much of a shakeup, I think, because if they were to really do something like ban all these clubs from European competition for a year, like some fans are calling for, that would be a really major move that I think would actually end up upsetting some of the same fans that called for it when they actually had to live with that as a consequence. So I feel like they were trying to walk the line there between doing nothing and actually making the cure worse than the disease, so to speak.
Yeah, and that was really only applied to the 9 clubs that agreed to those sanctions, if you will. You have the other 3 that kind of stepped out. Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus finally come out with a response saying that it's intolerable under the rule of law, that there were, tribunals already ruled in favor of the Super League proposal and ordered, per this statement by them, that FIFA and UEFA to refrain from taking any action which would hinder the initiative. So I think that this is going to be more of a topic that will continue and not have this is not going to be the end of it at all from a fan perspective, but also from a UEFA perspective. I assume that there will be court cases.
Certainly, there's going to be continued legal issues going on with those 3 clubs that are refusing those measures simply because I feel like they were sort of the ones who were the biggest proponents of this to start with, and probably the ones most likely to try and do something like this again in the future. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be something we're going to continue to hear about going forward in one way or another. probably for quite some time, much to the dislike of a lot of people on social media.
It makes sense why they wanted to do something like this. It's because you're not always guaranteed those big matches, the revenue that comes with the Champions League, with the Europa League, and now the upcoming third, the Conference League. But it's just a part of the game. It's a part of the sport. It's 100 years of people and clubs being up and down, not going through the normal processes of that, and just kind of taking away the ability for someone from a really low level to make their way up to the top. Really just kind of spits in the face of decades and 100 years of tradition to the sport. So with City versus PSG, man, that second leg match was rough for there. Going into the match, there really was a good chance at PSG really making it back from that first loss, but not even including Di Maria's red card, which I don't actually think. I don't know. Looking at the replays and really watching it, it looked like he was trying to make a kick out to the ball, but just slipped, and it just happened to be on the foot of the opposing player in a time where the match was already tense. So there's really not a way that ref could have assumed that it was an accident, because that match was already heated.
Agreed. I understand the call, and I do agree with it, even if maybe it was accidental, because like you said, it's difficult for the ref to discern that intent, even when it's not already a match like this that's sort of starting to fall apart at the seams. And it could definitely have gone either way there. But the way that things fell apart even more afterwards, I don't think PSG would have had a way back, even had the red card not been issued. I definitely don't feel as though that decided the tie in any way.
No, I agree completely. Yeah, PSG did not seem to have everything together like Manchester City did. Like, it was, regardless of the hail, which I really saw conflicting views on that. I saw pictures of what I assumed to be hail. I saw pictures of what I assumed to be snow. Manchester City tweeted about the hail. Other people there were tweeting about it being snow. It was a really weird looking pitch for the beginning of May for a football match. I don't know that I've seen too many football matches be played on snow in the month of May. Have you?
No, it's definitely not a common occurrence in May to begin with. That's really quite strange. I mean, it's as long as the pitch is deemed safe to play on, I guess they can play in any conditions. But if there's actually hail coming down, that would concern me a little bit from a safety perspective. I have to admit that could definitely cause damage to someone's eyes or all kinds of things. So I certainly hope that was maybe an over-exaggeration, reports that there was actually hail, or maybe it had been a condition that had taken place earlier and that was what was still present on the pitch. That was a bit strange to hear about. I was watching it going, I said, where is this taking place?
Yep. But it didn't really seem to bother Manchester City much at all. Like, they were quick, they had good counters, they had really good play build up. And like I said earlier, I mean, Mahrez was really the star of that game. He couldn't really do a lot wrong in that match at all. And I had mentioned again Foden earlier, and he was really another one that he shined. He's a young guy that gets a lot of love, but also gets a lot of hate. And I think that hate is really unwarranted, especially when he can perform the way that he did in such a big match against another big European club.
Yeah, Manchester City, as I've said, is not one of my favorite clubs, but I have to give them props for being good at what they do. They're very organized. They're good at that build-up play and having several different options for players that can have an effect on a game. So, even though they're not my favorites, they're usually good to watch. And so at least there's that. So I'll give them that. They're good at what they do.
Yep. Yeah, and Man City had actually lesser amount of shots than PSG did. Manchester City had 12 to PSG's 14, but Manchester City had 5 shots on target to PSG's 0. And you can't really score goals if you're not shooting it on
Absolutely. I
target.
heard in the commentary actually that they hadn't had shots on target, not just for the entirety of this match, but for something like 135 minutes going back into the first tie. And that's not a way to progress through the Champions League.
No, no. I mean, people, will say defense wins games, but like you need some offense.
Exactly.
You need some way to be able to score
Yeah, that
something.
0-0 score line that defense can keep you at will keep you at a draw, but there comes a point where a draw is no longer good enough. So
Yep. Yeah, you had Mahrez scoring at 11 minutes in and 63 minutes in, and then that Di Maria red card came at 69. So the last 20 minutes or so, PSG played with 10 men and didn't give up a goal, surprisingly, but that really just did not help them at all.
noticeably worse with just 10 men on the field, and that's not good.
And it wasn't even just the fact that it was 10 men on the field. It was that somebody got sent off, and that it took the emotional level up higher. I did see that the referee, and I actually saw this like with my own eyes, like I watched the referee say fuck off to a PSG player once, and apparently he did that twice. Di Maria commented after the match, if I were to say that to the ref, I would receive a 10-match ban. I get a referee losing their cool a little bit, and they're getting ganged up on at times. You've got 8 players from 2 different squads all yelling at you, arguing at you, pushing each other into you, and you have to control the game. But at a certain point, I think saying fuck off to the players is not necessarily the best look for a referee.
Level of professionalism I would like to see from referees, especially at this level of the game. Like this is really supposed to be the pinnacle of club competition in Europe, and yeah, it's not that I feel as though it's unjustified from the referee. I can certainly understand why you would want to say something like that, but at the end of the day, this is your job and you're at work, and there's a standard of behavior we should be expecting. I don't think that meets it.
Yep, there are very few jobs in the world out there where you can say fuck off to the people that you're doing business with and it not be a problem. So that's not a good look. I haven't actually seen anything come out about any sanctions or any implications to that, but I assume that there will be something that gets looked into if PSG actually mounts like a true protest on that. But so that puts Manchester City into the final, to Pep Guardiola's excitement and elation there. Chance of winning, a Champions League and the Premier League this year. They didn't finish the Premier League champion win here. I think a win today against Chelsea would have solidified their title reign there, but they didn't get it done. But we'll talk about that here in a second. With this Chelsea and Real Madrid match, it just I personally, I was very expecting Real Madrid to be in the final. I thought that Chelsea was going to be a good squad. I figured that Real Madrid would be able to just overtake it from just a straight experience standpoint. Chelsea's a younger squad, has guys that don't or haven't played in a Champions League final before. Real Madrid obviously has multiple players that have done that, and it was really came as a shock to me. I'm all for it. I'm all for these young guys getting that experience, showing off and silencing the haters, because some of these Chelsea guys get a lot of haters online. But it was really just a poor showing by Real Madrid overall.
The Chelsea squad put up quite a good showing. They did a lot with not even a whole lot of the possession, honestly. But Real definitely were not performing up to what I was expecting to see from them. I don't know if maybe there's injuries on the squad, but just what you would expect from a team with that pedigree at this stage of this competition. I just thought they would be better. I was definitely also expecting them to be the ones going through, even though I'm certainly very happy for Chelsea, despite the fact that I didn't want to see an all-English final, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm there with you. About the all-English final. I think it's a little bit more exciting when you see some teams that aren't used to playing each other twice a season type thing. And that's why I really was pushing for, Real Madrid to win, because truthfully, I actually thought PSG and Real would be the final. That was my prediction, and I was very wrong out of all of that. But yeah, to bring back to your point, Real Madrid had 68% of the possession to Chelsea's 32. Real Madrid had 703 passes to Chelsea's 334. And it just was, they couldn't finish. They couldn't do anything with all that possession, with all of those passes. None of that means anything if you can't score. But Chelsea just had 15 shots to Real's 7, with both of them having 5 shots on target. So it really was Real Madrid just kind of dropped the ball completely on getting things going. I found it interesting. Apparently, Real Madrid had never played at Stamford Bridge before. They've met Chelsea at Athens, or like in Athens. They've played each other in Monaco and then Madrid, but they've never actually played Chelsea at Chelsea. And I guess I never realized that. And I don't think that really was truly impactful because of the lack of fans, but I can't imagine what this scoreline would have been if that was full of Chelsea fans.
Yeah, and that would have been such an enjoyable experience for the fans as well. I thought that is shocking. I'm very surprised to hear that as well, actually.
Yeah, because neither clubs are really lower quality historically. They've both have participated in a lot of European competitions, but that was the first time, and it did not go well for Real Madrid. Mendy, the goalkeeper, great saves. I mean, that first shot from Benzema, I feel like would have went in against most goalkeepers. He just really was on point with the defense there, because Chelsea's backline necessarily didn't have the best game that they could have had against Real, and Mendy just picked up those holes that they had. It just really, really kept them. I mean, the clean sheet was 100% deserved in my mind.
I feel as though a lot of Chelsea fans don't rate Mendy very highly as a goalkeeper. I hear a lot of chat about that online, but he's capable of a lot of very acrobatic saves, and it's quite entertaining to watch when he's on, and he can actually make those really great saves that are necessary, unfortunately, when the back line has some of the disorganization we see sometimes from it. But I don't think he's a bad goalkeeper at all. I feel as though some of the criticism he gets online is really unwarranted.
Yeah, and speaking of bad backlines, Real Madrid, that first Werner goal, it was effectively an alley-oop. It bounced off the crossbar, and Werner was just standing and just jumped and headed it right in, and nobody was paying attention to him at all.
Great positioning from him. That was the right place, right time to just pick it up.
Yep, and it was needed. I mean, that Chelsea scoring first, I feel, was a catalyst in them gaining that confidence to say, hey, we're going to finish this off. Like, we don't have a lot of possession. We're not making a ton of passes because we don't have the ball a lot. But as long as we can capitalize on these defensive mistakes, we got it. Because even when on some of the counters and some of the speed that Chelsea has, Real Madrid just seemed a little bit off defensively.
Certainly. I feel like both of these teams were sort of mindset types of teams. And I don't know as much about Real Madrid. It's not a league I'm super familiar with. But I know this is true for Chelsea, is that they're either on or they're off. And it's how their mindset is going into it. And like you said, that scoring first did a lot for them, I think, in this match. And I think it might have honestly done a bit against Real Madrid.
Yep. Yeah, because that second goal from Mount right into the net there, I feel like they just lost track of him. Like the pass over to him to just get it in threw them off their kilter, threw them out of their focus, and it was a beautiful, beautiful attempt there. And I mean, even some of the stuff from Werner, who gets a decent amount of hate because, people say that he doesn't perform for Chelsea. He's not living up to his expectations. He had a really great backheel pass to Mount that made me say, damn, all right, okay. Like there was that flash of, I don't want to say brilliance, but that a little bit of flash of brilliance that I knew that he was capable of, that he's not really necessarily pulled out for Chelsea in those moments. So it brings Chelsea to that final match against Manchester City, which is a repeat of the league match that happened, today, this weekend. It was really a poor showing, in my opinion, by Manchester City in regards to what will be a preview of the final. They just looked a little bit off. Now, both teams did have differing formations than their Champions League match. Both teams had a little bit of different makeup of the roster itself. Manchester City, it seems like they had around like 5-ish players that were not starting today that had started against that match against PSG, and the formation was different. And same could be said for Chelsea there against their match with Real. They had a couple people that just didn't start and didn't even see any playing time at all, but they could still pull out that win against Man City. And I think that's going to probably be the outcome in the Champions League. I don't know that Manchester City has the momentum behind them. Like, by that point, they will have the Premier League title secured, most likely. But I don't think it's enough. I think this Chelsea squad's young, hungry, and they want to really prove a lot of people wrong. So I personally think that Chelsea is probably going to beat Manchester City in the final.
See a repeat of today's league match occurring in the Champions League final for sure. Watching the two teams play today felt like watching sort of different teams than we've seen in the Champions League, because as you've said, they definitely did a lot of changes to the squads. When the lineups came out online, people were talking about them like, what's with all these changes? The formations were pretty different from what we've seen. And I think it was a bit of experimentation from both managers, kind of testing each other out about how that final could potentially go. But this could have been a pretty different league match. So I don't know entirely that I'm super comfortable with the prediction, but I am hoping for Chelsea to pull it out.
Yeah, and Chelsea's last minute goal there by Alonso was the latest winning goal scored in an away Premier League match against Manchester City since Paul Scholes for Man United in April 2010, which that's crazy that was 11 years ago, truthfully. But I think that late goal is really kind of what it really solidified to me that Chelsea has what it takes, because like they're not giving up. They could have just been fine with that draw. It doesn't have any impact on their top 4 standings. They're going to be in the Champions League next year with the table makeup. But Man City's just not had really good time with the last minute goals. Also, per Opta Joe, Manchester City have lost consecutive Premier League home games thanks to a goal scored in the 90th minute this year for as many times as they had in their previous 235 matches at the Etihad. So I just think that Manchester City just kind of starts trailing off a little bit at the end. Like, okay, we've got a draw. This is an okay result. We're still going to win the league, so we'll just kind of coast. But Chelsea was hungry, as I said earlier, and they want all of those wins that they can to finish out the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking earlier about Chelsea being that mentality orientation where, like you said, they could have settled for the draw. It wouldn't have made a difference, but they wanted the win, because you always, that's what you're supposed to want when you go out to play the game. And even though it doesn't matter in the points, it's going to matter in their mindset, I think, in how we're going to see them approach the league in the next few weeks, as well as the FA Cup final, and then going into that Champions League final. Getting that win will just change the way that they can think about those next few weeks versus, well, hey, at least we didn't lose. There's a big difference between that and, yeah, we won.
Yeah, and I mean, really speaking to their forward matches, they play Arsenal on the 12th. They play Leicester City in the FA Cup final on the 15th. They play Leicester City in the league on the 18th. They play Aston Villa, who's played spoiler to a lot of teams this season, on the 23rd. And then 6 days later, they're playing Manchester City in the Champions League final. So Chelsea doesn't really have a easy schedule going forward, really, to finish out the year. Whereas Manchester City plays Newcastle, Brighton, Everton, and then they play Chelsea. So Manchester City has some time to build up some momentum and some confidence in themselves against teams that haven't necessarily performed very well against the top flight clubs Although Newcastle did just put 4 goals on Leicester in a very surprise showing the other day.
that was a heck of a game. I was very surprised to see that.
But I think that it's something that's talked about a lot is Thomas Tuchel, and his impact on the team. They kind of got a lot of hate on the internet for getting rid of Lampard when they did, but I really think it was a smart move because Thomas Tuchel's now played, according to ESPN, Real Madrid, Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham, Everton, and Atletico, right? And 8 wins in those matches and 1 goal conceded. And I mean, some of those managers you've got Klopp, Mourinho, and Ancelotti. Those are very prestigious, very solid Hall of Fame type managers. And Tuchel's just taken Chelsea and completely changed the way that they look. And I think it's for the better.
The most shocking thing that's happened with Tuchel's Chelsea has really been that loss against West Brom in the league where they conceded 5 goals. Other than that, they've put up great results against teams that are, really good competitors and really big names, and they've done exceptionally well. So I think that they have a lot of potential right now, whatever Tuchel is doing with them. Strange relationship advice analogies aside that I've read on Reddit, he should keep doing it, I guess.
Yep. And so in regards to the final itself, as of just this weekend, apparently Turkey's now in a pretty bad spot as far as COVID goes. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with that, and we're probably still going to be dealing with that for a little bit. And so there kind of is a talk that UEFA and the FA are trying to relocate the final from Istanbul to somewhere in the UK so players don't have to quarantine after the final, because that will interrupt with the international play.
Yeah,
right?
the UK added Turkey to their red list as far as travel goes, which would require that 10-day quarantine upon people returning. Since the final is scheduled for May 29th, there is European Championships kicking off June 11th. That's not going to leave a big window. So they'd like to see it move to a UK venue, potentially Wembley. But there would be a bit of a conflict with the championship playoff final scheduled for the same day. That would need to be moved to a different venue. So I would imagine these talks are going to continue going forward for a bit of time before we find out what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, that kind of really puts a damper on the neutral stadium for those championship playoffs, because Wembley is really the end-all be-all UK stadium that gets utilized there. So I'm really not certain where they would even host that. I'm assuming that it would just be something where they just push it back to like the day after, or push it forward a day to make it so they can still have it at Wembley, because do you have an idea of like what stadium they would play it at instead?
I don't have any information on that. I could not find any sources that really mentioned alternatives. I know that rescheduling instead was something that was mentioned in at least a couple of articles, but I would imagine if they are potentially considering moving it, then there must be ideas in a proposal somewhere of where they would move it to.
That makes sense. And switching over to the Europa League semifinals, there you had Roma versus Man United and Arsenal versus Villarreal. That was a good showing by Man United and a very poor showing by Arsenal. We'll talk Roma and Man United first there. That first match made it really difficult for Roma to be able to come back and finish that tie out. If they were to come back from a 6-2 defeat, I mean, that would have been one of the best performances that we've seen in a long time as far as the sport goes. I can't think of, like off the top of my head, I definitely can't think of anything of a better showing if Roma would have been able to pull it off. And truthfully, they really kind of almost did. Like, it was a very, very strong showing by Roma. They had 12 shots on target to Man United's 5. They had 22 total shots. I mean, they really took it to Man United. They just couldn't finish. And some of it was, De Gea's really good goalkeeping, and some of it was just unfortunate slight curves on some of their shots that just took it right out of, just barely out of the goal.
Yeah, the highlight reel for De Gea from that match is really impressive. He did a lot of work for Man United to keep them in the game. But Roma did fantastic. They just had their work cut out for them after that first leg of the tie, and it was just a little too much to overcome. But that was an exciting game. It was a good match to watch with a lot of back and forth.
I chuckled a little bit after one of Roma's goals. I think it was the third one. I heard in the background the stadium play a song, and that's not unusual that a stadium plays a song for, when it comes to a goal. But they played Blink-182's "All the Small Things," and I think that was a little. I don't know who chose that because they were at home with Roma, and it felt like a dig, like, hey, yeah, you did score this third goal, but like it still doesn't matter because you're not going to come up on the aggregate, like you're not going to make it. That definitely made me chuckle there. But Roma didn't celebrate after their goals. Every single one was picked up the ball out the net, ran back to the midfield, high-fived as they went on their way. Like the good showing by them to, it doesn't. They realized that no matter what they did and how much they wanted to celebrate, they needed to just continue to score more goals. And they had a really, really attacking mindset that whole match, but it really wasn't enough. And I think it was partially due to Edison Cavani's brilliance there. People talk a lot about Bruno Fernandes and, him being, a big star, a big impact on that team. But in that match, Cavani had flashes of brilliance that in really the whole Europa League. He's played 4 matches in the Europa League for United this season, and he had 5 goals in him. So I don't think that necessarily he gets the amount of love that he deserves, truthfully, for that United team.
He's certainly one of the standout players for Man United. He's another one where the way people talk about him online is definitely not warranted in comparison to the way he actually plays for the club. But he absolutely has been great in this Champions League for them. It's been unbelievable, some of the things he's been able to pull off, especially some of the headers that he's been able to score.
Yep. And this match was 8-5, so it was 13 goals over the 2 legs, and that was the second highest tally across 2 legs of any major UEFA competition semifinal, behind Frankfurt's 12-4 scoreline with Rangers in the 1959 and 1960 European Cup. So this was not something that we see very often at all, but it was a good showing. It was a good match by both teams. It just Roma, unfortunately, did not have it in them to keep this scoreline competitive in that first leg, and so there was just no way to come back from that, really. But that makes it Man United's 8th major European final, second to only Liverpool as far as English teams go. So they probably have them thinking they're going to go pretty strong and carry that momentum into their match against Villarreal, which, again, Arsenal, that was just, they did that.
It was painful. It was painful to watch.
Yeah.
They've not been in good form recently, and it's just, I don't even know what I was watching for some of that game. They had some of those shots off the post, which was just like, okay, you've got most of the pieces in the right places, just get the last piece. But Villarreal did a good job at shutting down what they were trying to do as well. I don't want to place all of the blame on Arsenal. The defense was doing their job, but it's not what you expect from a team with Arsenal's history and their pedigree, and there's the number of years they've been in European competition consecutively. It's not like they're rookies at this.
I'd watched Troops TV talk about his fan cam after the match, and one of his biggest points was, you brought off Aubameyang in minute 79, and then you brought off Tierney in minute 80, and you brought on Lacazette and Willian. And neither of those players have really performed super well this season. And with Aubameyang being really probably one of the best, if not the best player on Arsenal, you expect lean on him to finish out that last, 10 plus the extra time minutes there. And it was really a surprise that they had brought him off when they did, and it didn't help at all. Unfortunately, they had nothing there. As far as like stats go, it was a pretty even possession and pass accuracy. Arsenal just had 1 shot on target, and that's not enough. And I think that Arteta has been given tons of chances. I think that he's probably not gonna last for too much longer, though, with Arsenal. I think, finishing under 7th in the league table losing out to their old manager, Unai Emery in a Europa League semifinal. I can't imagine that the brass at Arsenal are going to keep him around for too long.
I think you're probably right about that. Whether fans think it's fair or not, I know people disagree. He's had a lot of chances. I don't think the powers that be at the club are going to be willing to give him too many more at this point.
Yep. Because, again, another stat here from Off to Joe, in 2020 to 2021, Arsenal has failed to reach the final of a major European domestic cup competition for the first time since 2015-2016. Just not acceptable for a club that has the global fandom and is considered to be, one of those top 6 European clubs. I don't think that it's gonna happen there. Now, Villarreal, I don't think that they have enough muster behind them to take on Man United. I think that United's probably going to win the Europa League. If they do lose and it is Villarreal that wins, that will be a very huge match. That'll be a very big accomplishment for Emery and that squad, because this is Villarreal's first ever European competition final, I believe, what I read. And that's, props to them, but I don't necessarily think they have enough to stop the potential of a 6-goal showing by Manchester United.
I definitely think Manchester United have the upper hand going into the Europa League final, just because they do have that experience of being there before. It is that first time in the final for Villarreal, and they are in good form. They've had the good goal scoring going on with Cavani, especially being just on fire in this competition. So they've got the upper hand, I think, going into it. If there's going to be an upset, it will be pretty shocking.
I agree. I'm down for that, though. As we had talked about, not really caring for the 2 English team final of the Champions League. I think that a non-English team winning the Europa League would be the better storyline. I'm always usually down for an underdog, coming through and making it happen. And so I really would like to see Manchester United not win, but gun to my head, it's Manchester United. I don't see really any other outcome. Now, switching over to the women's Champions League matches, we had Barcelona versus PSG and Chelsea versus Bayern. We'll start here with Barcelona and PSG. They played on May 2nd for their second leg. Both teams, actually. Both matches were pretty early here in the USA and really over in Europe, too. I believe the matches were at 6 o'clock and 7:30 a.m. in the morning here for the East Coast of USA, which puts it at like 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning for the West Coast, but that still is noon, like 1-2 o'clock on a Sunday for Europe. So I was really kind of surprised at how early they put it in the day.
Even the first one, the Barcelona PSG match, was earlier than I'm used to getting up to watch women's football out of Europe. And that's saying something, because I'm used to getting up at about 7 in the morning, but this was even earlier than that. So that's fun.
I think it was a really good showing by Barcelona. I personally, again, was rooting for PSG to move on to the final, but Barcelona's just had a crazy season this year. I mean, they usually win the league and have a great goal differential, and really the only team that's truly competitive in women's Spanish league. But they finished this season, or well, not necessarily finished, but they have currently, last I looked, like 120 goal differential, that's just insane.
Absolutely. I believe it's 122 at this point. They've only conceded 5 goals in 25 matches in their leagues. So they're definitely a powerhouse as far as that league goes in Spain.
And it was really kind of carried over into this match versus PSG there. It was a tie 1-1 on the first leg going into this match, but that first goal by Barcelona 8 minutes in really kind of set the tone, I feel. And it was a beautiful shot. a cross goal. It was shot from the left, ended into the right part of the net, and that was a first touch. That was a beautifully placed ball that I believe it was Martins scored for Barcelona there.
Liga Martins, absolutely. She's such a dynamic player. She can score with her head, she can score with her feet, and she's good at being in the right position.
Yep, and she scored both of them actually, I believe, for Barcelona there. Had a really great low cross coming in, and she just had really good instinct to just tap it in. Just be right place, right time, get what was needed, and PSG just really didn't have a true answer for that.
Yeah, PSG were definitely a bit subdued in this game. The first half was, I thought maybe they were going to be able to rally. They had that breakthrough off a set piece from Marie Katoto, but in the second half, just kind of everybody was just a little bit sleepier, so to speak, and nothing else really happened. And those 2 goals from Liga Martins in the beginning just stood and took Barca through. So I think that's going to be interesting to see in the final, the way that attack is going to be moving forward.
And now, give credit to PSG where it was due there. Barcelona really just gave up defending on that Katoto goal.
Yeah.
Like watching the replays of it, I tried to find a singular Barcelona player that was looking not up at the ball, because it went pretty high off that, like the set piece. It went pretty high up into the air, and after I believe it was a deflection, and everybody was just waiting for that ball to drop. But there were multiple PSG players that were like looking at their positioning and trying to figure out where to go and glancing up at the ball, whereas all of Barcelona was just had head up, just straight in the air, just waiting for that to drop. And that was a perfect chance for Katoto to actually like get in there and finish that off. It just they couldn't reconnect again. They couldn't replicate that, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. PSG are usually pretty good on corners and set pieces, so I was kind of surprised they couldn't manage to do that another time. But I think they did have how many corners did they have? They had 5 corners to work with in the match. I knew it was quite a few. Yeah, so they had 5 corners to work with in the match, and they're normally quite good off their set pieces and corners. I really thought PSG might be able to answer back with at least one more of those, but it just was not going to happen for them.
Nope. And speaking of one of those corners, the last corner of the game was pretty much the ending of it. And I love this. I love when goalkeepers jump into the box on those at the end of the match to help try to get that in. And so that's what you saw with Endler. She was in the box in the thick of things trying to get that in. And PSG, I mean, it was almost there. Like they had such a solid chance at getting it in and tying it up right at the end to push it into extra time. And it just unfortunately just didn't happen for PSG.
Yeah, we're pretty close there at the end. It always puts my heart in my throat when they send the goalkeeper forward. So it was an exciting game. I do wish there'd maybe been a bit more action in that second half, but overall, it's a Champions League semifinal. It's always going to have some action.
And so we had Martins scored at 8 minutes in, 31 minutes in, and then Katoto scored at 34 minutes in. And the last little bit of the match had the most excitement in the second half, and I think it was just PSG just came out from the locker room after halftime and just didn't really have a lot of oomph behind them. I think they felt a little bit subdued. And so it was unfortunate to see, but I mean, props to Barcelona there. It was a really good showing by them. And that sets them up into the final, up against Chelsea, who won their match, the second leg 4-1 against Bayern, who I believe it was Bayern won their other match 2-1. That's correct, yeah?
We did, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was a good showing by Chelsea there. That first goal from Chelsea was fun. That was a good, Kerr to Kirby was what that was, and it was some fun soccer to see.
Yeah, that first goal was just what we expect to see out of the Chelsea women, but it was still a big sigh of relief. I know that at least for me, I was very relieved when we got that, because that's the basic expectation. So good, we got that part. Now we can move on from that. Then of course you have the immediate, but not quite immediate. It was a little bit, I think it was about 10 or 15 minutes later, where Sarah Zadrazil equalized from outside the box. So yeah, about 29 minutes, Sarah Zadrazil did that absolute stunner from outside the box to equalize. And I mean, Ann-Katrin Berger is one of the best keepers in the world, and she really didn't even have much of a chance to react. as a Chelsea supporter, I couldn't even be mad. Like, it was such a great goal. Like, you can watch that back and go, like, what could you do? You can't even be upset. That was amazing.
100%. I think that you make that shot and hit that crossbar 10 times, and it does not do what it did 9 out of those 10 times. Like, it just was such an unexpected, in my mind at least, an unexpected ricochet off that crossbar that just nothing to be done. You just had to stand and watch it, because usually when it hits that crossbar, it's not going to go in and under with the force that it did. I see a lot of when it hits the crossbar, it goes straight down. This carried the momentum and went directly into the back of the net.
Yep, it was an amazing goal. So unfortunately, that did put everybody kind of back on edge as far as Chelsea went. And we ended up with that free kick taken by Ji So-yoon, which came off the wall, actually, was directly into the wall and right back to her. And everybody kind of diminished the importance of what happened next because it did sort of come right back to her. She had to reset her body position, reposition just a little bit towards that other post, and just straight through the bodies that were sort of scrambling because they thought she was going to do something different. And I think that really renewed Chelsea's energy going into the halftime talk. And I definitely think it changed the way Emma Hayes probably gave that talk in that dressing room.
I don't think that the Bayern goalkeeper could have seen that because of just how many bodies were in the way, because that was like a perfectly placed low shot. Like, there really wasn't a lot of altitude to that second goal. It went underneath some of the wall because they were jumping expecting it to go high, and it was just a perfectly placed cross because she was on the right side of the goal too, and it was kind of low and placed into like the left side of the goal itself. And with that cross and the amount of bodies, I don't think anybody could have done much with it, truthfully.
Yeah, it looked like it was almost in slow motion, and everybody was just sort of like, wait, that's not where that was supposed to go. And that's the impression that I got from that. She's an amazing player, and I don't want to say I don't think she gets the credit she deserves, because she gets a lot of credit, but she's so underrated in comparison to some of maybe the bigger names for Chelsea.
Do you think it's a little bit because she's not English, but playing with an English team?
I don't necessarily think it's because of that. I think it's that she's just less vocal. I think maybe she doesn't use social media as much as some of the other players, and that's a big thing in women's football, is the interactivity with fans, and that has to do with how you're thought of. And I think that might have to do with her, when she first came to playing European football, maybe her English wasn't as good, and I think she just never got in the habit. But either way, I think the people that love her a lot.
Going back to Sam Kerr, another thing that made me chuckle was I felt it. Like, when Sam Kerr missed that shot, like in an almost a perfect one-on-one opportunity, like the camera panned to her like a close-up, and she was biting all of her fingers. Like, she stuck 8 fingers in her mouth and just bit down on them. And I chuckled, but I felt it. Like, that was such a tense and frustrating moment. And she just did not pull that off. No matter how great of a player she is, there's just sometimes you're not going to get them.
Pretty much started the portion of the game that took minutes off my life, probably years off my life when I think of it. Between the missed shot that I was pretty sure that was going to somehow come back to haunt them, but there were so many saves and so much goal line defending that I have no idea how Bayern didn't score. Between Ann-Katrin Berger and Magda Eriksson, they were just a brick wall on the goal line. I genuinely have no idea how there was not a Bayern goal there, but Magda is the rock of this team. And I think that whenever her next contract negotiation comes up, she should bring tape of this match and then their last couple league matches without her, particularly the one against Manchester City. Just be like, here, just watch these, watch that, and get back to me. That should be her negotiation.
So yeah, I need paid. I'm helping carry this team a little bit here on the defensive side. Let's make this happen. Because really, I mean, it was pretty equal as far as like shots on target. Chelsea had 16 to Bayern's 19, and they both had 4 on target. So all likelihood could have been a 4-4 match had it not been for some really good defending by Chelsea.
It did not feel like watching a 4-1 match. Towards the end, we were saying, but I said, when the people send their keeper forward for at the end of a match, it puts my heart in my throat. And that's what Bayern did. They needed a score again. They tried. And then Drew Spence, her face was the sacrifice that was necessary there at the end. She just got elbowed in the face. And the ref signaled, play on, play on. And I'm like, okay, I'm busy screaming. She just got backhanded in the face. And then they're panning the camera over. And I didn't even register who it was that scored. I just see someone running towards an open goal being chased by 3 defenders. And I'm just screaming at the top of my lungs at like God knows what time in the morning. So that's great.
The 8:30 probably roughly, woke up some of your neighbors. You say, just soccer things, just women's football. But that was exactly my next point was the forearm to the face was in my head when I was watching it, I didn't scream. I'm not a necessarily Chelsea supporter there, so my thoughts were internal. But I thought, man, that was a really hard foul. Like I get giving advantage, but like that was a rough hit to the face. Like that I felt like that should have been stopped and addressed and whatnot. But I'm glad it didn't, for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think if it hadn't been the last play of the game with the keeper up for a corner, I think the ref probably would have treated that a lot differently. But they're like, you know what? Let's just let it go at this point. This is the end. So I like the call thinking back on it. But at the time, I was very like, what the hell is happening right now? And then I realized
just goal open, Chelsea streaming forward. It would have been more upsetting probably to the fans had she stopped it right then, because it's one of those, you can't win no matter what, because you'd get yelled at for stopping play when there was an open goal and Chelsea's racing towards it, but then you're going to get yelled at for seemingly not caring about somebody just taking an arm to the face and getting knocked down. But a good play on Chelsea. Their counterattack, their speed, just really Bayern didn't have a whole bunch to it when they really got going with it. So who do you think is going to win out of the final there between Barcelona and Chelsea? What do you think that match looks like?
Is a big question mark to me. This is going to be, a first-time winner no matter who. What I'm thinking is, Barcelona really love to attack. Chelsea are really great on the counterattack. I just can't think how Emma Hayes is going to set up her midfield and back line. She's really been depending on having the second leg to kind of tune it up a little bit. So that's going to be the question mark, is who are we going to have as far as the defending for Chelsea? Because that's where they tend to shift around a bit. Barcelona have been to the final before. They lost back in 2019, but it's going to be a good match. I definitely don't think we're going to see a lot of boring football from these two teams. And the good news is it is going to be free to view on BT Sport platforms. That does include their official legal YouTube channel on Sunday, May 16th. So people will be able to watch it without having to worry about whether they get that network. I could not guess who is going to win this game, but of course, I would love to see the Chelsea women and the Chelsea men both bring home the Champions League.
I think that would be good for women's football, truthfully, because that would increase the amount of exposure and storylines between the two. If Chelsea were to win both the men's and the women's Champions League, I think that would bring some exposure that just is not going to get put onto that Chelsea women's team if the men's team do, because that's going to be talked about in podcasts and articles and TV shows that are talking about it. It's because that's not something that usually happens. Even Barcelona's, with their dominance in the women's division and their league, like you said, they've not won a final, so you don't have the matching of their men's and women's team in those finals like you will potentially Chelsea. And so I think it would be good for overall, even if it's, not good for Barcelona's women's team. I think just women's soccer in general will benefit from having Chelsea win both, truthfully.
I think it would be a pretty good story. And as, like I said, obviously, as a fan of Chelsea, I love what Emma Hayes has done with them. And I know that that's been her goal all the years she's been with them. And the club has been supportive of her in that attempt. And so I think that would be a kind of a great reward on that level, that, having that club-wide success all at once would feel like good karma.
I agree. Which, moving on to the Women's Cup, which is a preseason, off season, in the middle of everything kind of tournament there. But it's exciting to see, two teams that made it far into the Women's Champions League come over and showcase their skills to the American sports fans here. I think that'll be a good push for helping build women's soccer more here in America. So for those who are not in the know, the Women's Cup is just a 4-team kind of tournament going on between Bayern women's, PSG women's, and then Racing Louisville and Chicago Red Stars. So we have like the ICC tournament, on the men's and women's side, but those are usually the larger teams in the NWSL and whatnot. So this is a showcase for some of the not so larger teams, if you will, in the NWSL to have a chance to play, a European counterpart that's successful and well known. You have both teams playing. It's a doubleheader on August 18th. You have PSG versus Bayern, and then Racing Louisville and Chicago Red Stars. And then the winner of both of those games will play on the 21st. I believe also on the 21st will be the bronze medal game, which is the two losers of those. And tickets really aren't too expensive. They start at $25. And so I think that's a hell of a deal to watch some European top women's teams over here in America.
Absolutely. For an opportunity to see PSG and Bayern play, I'm seriously considering trying to take off work and drive about 14 hours. So who knows? It should be an exciting event. Absolutely.
And and I don't want to say that, Kentucky is not the bastion of, women's sports in general or women's soccer, but I think that it being where it is in the Midwest of the states is a good thing to help build up, women's soccer in that area of the country that doesn't usually get the love. Most, big games are played over on the West Coast, or they're played, in Cary, North Carolina, or, just somewhere in the, North Carolina, or like, New Jersey, New York area. So I think it's a good choice to keep it in the Midwest and to make it so those people that are, just wanting to see a good quality women's sports match but may not necessarily follow these European teams or maybe not follow just the NWSL in general. PSG and Bayern are globally recognized brands, no matter the men's or women's. And I think that's going to drive interest just because of who the two European teams are.
Those are big names. People who are not necessarily big soccer, football people might have heard of them or at least seen their jerseys or kits. That brand recognition over time builds up in people's minds. And so it's going to be good for not just women's soccer or women's football, but the sport in general, I think, to have this kind of cross-pollination between the US and Europe. As people say, we play different versions of the sport, and I don't necessarily agree with that. And that's, it's sort of we're two countries separated by a common language, the US and England. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of the same way. We can understand each other if we try, and I think that can apply to football too. So I like to see that Europe and US mixing together a little bit.
And you can find more information about all of this tournament at thewomenscup.world, thewomenscup.world, not .com there, which I think is going to be exciting. Depending on COVID, depending on restrictions, locally within Kentucky, is going to shake up on how it works out, but you can reserve your tickets now. And it's, I believe, from what I understand, the first reservations, first come, first serve kind of thing. So the earlier you reserve your spot to buy a ticket, the better chance that you will be able to get an actual seat there. But I mean, truthfully, I'm hoping by August we're at more capacity and have more fans in stadiums because we have a better grasp on it. But who knows with COVID? It's been a whirlwind there. So sticking on this kind of in the North American side of football and soccer, the CONCACAF here, Liga MX has a decent amount of hot things coming, if you will. You have the men's side getting into some good matchups and kind of getting up to the end of the season, but some really, really hot matches for the women's side as well.
For Liga MX down in Mexico, the men's teams are playing their reclassification matches prior to their playoffs to just kind of determine who's going to get the last few spots in those playoffs. On the women's side, their format doesn't have that same step. They just go straight into the playoffs themselves. They've already had their first leg actually yesterday, and the second leg of those quarterfinals will be Monday. See, Tigres ran over Club America very easily, winning by 4-0. Rayadas beat Pumas 2-1. Chivas beat Toluca 1-0. And Pachuca beat Atlas 2-0. So not a lot of goals scored in most of those matches, with the exception of Tigres, but we'll see what's going to happen going forward on those second legs when the venues are going to be a little bit different.
No, that Tigres match, that was very, very disappointing. I'm just getting into Liga MX Femenil. I follow Monterrey, Randos for on the men's side, but I've seen multiple Club America women's matches now, and so I, kind of rooting for them. And 4-0, that's not what I was hoping for in that first leg. I think that's going to be really hard for them to come back, especially because they were the home team that match that Tigres scored 4 on them. So it's going to be rough to get, to make up that 4-0 differential in that second leg.
They were the 8th place team to qualify into the Liga playoff. And they actually only qualified in, I believe, because Cruz Azul lost the match they played on the last match day. So it was they squeaked in. So they're just happy to be there. Should be the line of thought.
That's a good way to put it. And Tigres is top of the league here at the moment. They're with 40 points. So I mean they are the clear favorites there. So should have been expected, but I guess I was expecting a little bit better showing from them, Club America, to put up a slight bigger fight there.
Certainly, but hope springs eternal. That's why we always play the game. You never know what the result is going to be until the final whistle.
And even some of those whistles are unexpected on some finals there. Switching over to the men's Liga MX side, just today we had an injury to one of the linesmen who just slipped and hurt themselves and had to really take care of that injury. So even those whistles have nothing to do with the actual play on the game.
You always have to expect the unexpected in CONCACAF. It's a chaotic place.
Yep. And with that, you have, for the ending of the Liga MX side here,
what'll happen is that Atlas Tigres just played, and I think Tigres is eliminated now.
1-0 was the final for that. Yep.
Yeah, so Atlas will go on and play one of those 4, and then either Santos Laguna or Querétaro will go on and play one of those 4, and then either León or Toluca will go on and play one of those 4, and Pachuca Chivas will go on and play one of those 4. So those are single legged, and then when they get into the actual quarterfinals, then it goes to that double leg format. Liga MX has a really strange format.
Is that partially due to COVID, or is that usually just how it works?
No. They have this weird format anyway, but they added this repechaje reclassification thing, I think in 2018 or 2019. So it's fairly new that they have that part, but yeah, it's not because of COVID.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, you say weird. I think it's a little bit strange there too, but I mean, at a certain point, having some sort of variation and spicing things up is not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to soccer.
Oh yeah, by the way, I'm hoping I'm sad. Like, I'm not saying weird is like a bad thing, just to be clear on that one. But like, it's very different when you're used to looking at all kinds of other formats. You're like, wait a second, so it's a playoff for the playoff.
But I mean, it gives clubs a better opportunity to. There's always a difference in motivation in how you push and work towards a game if it's in the playoffs, knowing like, hey, we just had this long season. We just, played week after week, multiple times a week. It was a long slog. And then you've got the playoffs, the bit where you just really push and play the best football that you can total to really put a really good end mark on your season there. So I would argue that it's probably going to be really exciting, those matches, because it's the sudden death kind of end all be all type situation.
Yeah, those single game elimination rounds are really good for chaos. Just, people are just going all out trying to get through. And then when you get to those, the more standard 2-leg quarterfinal, semifinal games, even that's kind of different than playing just a single game knockout, right? You have a little bit more time to strategize. But with that extra step added where you've got this one game, make it or break it, that's tense, that's tight, and you got to think, how are we going to handle this in order to make it through? So it should be exciting to watch those take place over the course of this weekend. I believe there's actually one going on right now as we're recording, and there's a couple more tomorrow night.
Absolutely.
Fun weekend in Mexican football.
As far as the CONCACAF Champions League goes, that's been a pretty interesting showing there. We had a lot of MLS clubs in most of it up until now. You've got Club America versus Philadelphia Union, and then Monterrey, the Rayados there, against Cruz Azul in the semifinals there. Philadelphia, the team that I follow in MLS, really good showing in the Champions League. Really terrible showing in the MLS. They only have one win in 4 games in the MLS, but they've really put it to the other clubs in the Champions League so far. Beating Atlanta United 3-0, having, a 1-1 draw, beating Deportivo Saprissa 4-0. It's been multiple matches of multiple goals for them, and I think they'll carry it on. Club America is going to be a pretty tough matchup against them, though.
See, yeah, Philadelphia really impressed me when they were playing that match against Atlanta. I am not very familiar with a lot of MLS clubs. This is really my first year watching a lot of MLS on purpose, but my impression was that Atlanta should have probably won, is for what I was hearing from people. And so the way I watched Philadelphia play the two legs of the tie, I was like, wow, they set themselves up really well in the first leg and finished it off really well in the second leg. So I wish them the best of luck against Club America. We will see what happens when we come around to those semifinals this summer. And in the meantime, hopefully they can, kind of get it together a little bit in the league and get into a winning mentality to build up to that point and hopefully have a better chance to move forward.
Yeah, because it's really a bit away, honestly. You have the semifinal leg 1 for both of the clubs on August 10th and the second leg September 16th. And we're here at the beginning of May, so they've got a while to really regroup and plan on that. And unfortunately, that's more time for injuries to happen, more time for, things to really kind of go south for the teams here. But I would like to see Philadelphia, just from a personal standpoint, at least make the finals, because that'll be their first finals of, any really truly major competition that they've had as a team. And so that'd be really cool to see. I do think that the Monterrey and Cruz Azul it's just going to be a good match between them. They play each other often throughout the year, being in the same league there. But, with the last matchup between them, I believe Cruz Azul beat Monterrey 1-0. It's usually close-ish between the two clubs when they're playing. So as long as they, stay uninjured and keep that momentum going for a strong season in their domestic leagues, I think it'll be a good matchup. I would not be upset if it was two Mexican leagues or two Mexican clubs in the finals itself, because they're all exciting. All 3 of them are exciting Mexican clubs to watch. So it's not going to be bad football if that we're going to end up seeing, regardless of who's in the finals. Absolutely.
I think any combination of the 4 clubs going into the semifinals would be able to give an entertaining final performance. And truthfully, having 2 Mexican clubs in the CONCACAF Champions League final is not an uncommon occurrence historically. So as long as it's exciting, I will be happy to watch.
Very true. Which is a little bit, it's differing in our opinions on having 2 English clubs in the UEFA Champions League finals. Well, the UEFA Champions League has just existed for longer in general in those kind of those bigger European formats. And England has, English clubs have really dominated a lot of the time in those leagues. Not necessarily in total numbers of wins as far as the trophies go, but just being in the final and being just a dominant force throughout the tournament. I don't think that we've reached a point where we're Okay, another two Mexican team final, with the Champions League of CONCACAF.
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of, CONCACAF is in a really different footballing place than UEFA is in the world. And so I think it's just differing opinions on that is coming from different places. In Europe, you've got a lot more varied footballing powerhouses, right? You've got all these different, all these top, what people consider like the top 5, top 6 leagues in the world are basically all in UEFA. And you're only going to see one of them represented in the final of a Champions League. And that's just kind of a little bit disappointing. And then when you look at CONCACAF, Mexico is the powerhouse of CONCACAF because it's them, it's US with MLS. Canada doesn't really have much going on as far as their own league. I know they have one, but you hear about the Canadian clubs in MLS more than you hear about that.
Hey,
So,
that Canadian Premier League's on the come up there. That's
true.
I mean, it's postponing a little bit. I believe the last I saw was this season for them is a little bit in question, but it's good to see. Like coming from North America's living my entire life. I've never traveled outside of the country, unfortunately, yet. But it's soccer. I am glad to see that soccer is growing just in general in the area because it's, in my opinion, the best sport out there. I've really stopped watching all other North American based sports leagues except for ones that involve football. Well, soccer, that kind of football. And it's just been, it's been fun. It's been a fun experience. I really missed, 20 plus years of following the sport, paying attention to it, and really kind of making up for lost time with all of what I'm watching. So I'm excited to really consume many of it, keep helping it grow over here in North America. And finally, here we'll talk about NWSL. We just had a Challenge Cup tournament completed with a final today between Portland Thorns and the Gotham FC. It was ended in 1-1, and then they took it to penalties there, and it started out even. It was 4-4 out of the first 5, and then went on to 7 rounds. But Portland just edged it out just slightly and became the champions.
This was the first final of any kind in the modern NWSL for the newly rebranded New Jersey, New York Gotham FC. We're going to use their proper whole name. No, the TV announcers still are calling them sometimes by their old name, Sky Blue FC, which that's not what they're called anymore. Let's get it right, guys. But they were the inaugural champions of WPS in 2009, women's professional soccer, the precursor to the NWSL. So that's how long it had been since they'd been in a final, really. It's been a long time. So it was good to see them there coming off this rebrand with this cool new name, cool new kit. But Portland were still the stronger side throughout the match. They both had their chances. And, Gotham's goalkeeper, Didi Harashik, was a hero. She had some amazing saves. But you can just only do so much against the likes of Christine Sinclair for the Portland Thorns. She's a legend for a reason.
Well, and I mean, Portland had 26 shots, 8 of them on target, and Gotham had 8 total shots, 1 on target. With Portland equaling shots on target with how much Gotham had in total shots. I mean, that really speaks to the goalkeeper and to the defense of Gotham and how gritty they were at trying to keep it out. And as far as on the offensive side goes, I mean, Lloyd had a couple what I thought were perfect chances to just really bang it in, head it in, and unfortunately she only got one of those shots to really go in for him.
That was Gotham's game. They just they couldn't create enough chances to get more goals. And the chances that they did get, they just didn't make enough of them. And that's the way it goes in a final sometimes. But I'm very excited to see where they go with this energy going into the regular season.
Yeah, I think the rebranding really, I love the rebranding. I think that it makes a lot of sense for New Jersey, New York to be that. It's, there's always been the similarities between, the fictional Gotham and that area of the country, and them taking it and really just running with it is, I think, fantastic. I think the kits look good. The badge looks good. Fans seem to love it. And I think that, as silly as it sounds, I think that kind of gave them some momentum and some oomph behind their actions starting the tournament. I think that was an unspoken kind of push that they wouldn't have had if they went into the tournament as Sky Blue FC.
Yeah, the energy that they had from the rebrand definitely got them off on a strong foot. Maybe it wasn't quite enough in the face of an opponent like Portland to get through just on that mentality alone. But they'll be able to build on that, and I definitely think it's going to carry them a bit further into the regular season.
Who are your favorites to win the league this year for the NWSL once it gets going?
It's hard not to bet on this Portland team, but with all the news from OL Reign, bringing over some players from Lyon and some other pieces to come, who really knows? I'm bad at making predictions and don't really enjoy doing it. I can definitely predict that my club, the Orlando Pride, will probably not win.
Okay. Not a whole bunch of faith in what they've got going to push them to the top.
And for middle of the table's the most I'm going to let myself hope for.
Okay. Well, hey, I mean, yeah, it's low expectations, and they can only really impress you from there if you're expecting not a great showing, and that's what happens. Well, that's what you're expecting. You can't really get let down from that.
For sure. It's as they say, it's the hope that kills you.
So you've got that regular season starting here in not that long, on May 15th, and then that season wraps up on Halloween, October 31st, with the playoffs happening in November. They did announce their full season schedule, and they announced their broadcast schedule. I'm glad that women's soccer in America have a larger ability to be broadcast, especially internationally, with all of their games announced being internationally streaming on Twitch, which is great for the brand, for fans of just women's soccer that aren't physically located in the United States that are interested. Having a free platform for them to showcase the league is going to be great. I think Twitch's algorithms for recommended channels and kind of what's hot, what's going on the platform, it will really help put those league matches in front of those who utilize Twitch for gaming sports and for just other sports in general. But it is kind of frustrating that there's so much differentiation for North American fans who live over here, because you have a total of, there's going to be some matches on Paramount Plus, which is usually, I believe, the majority of them, but you have, which is a subscription platform, but then you have CBS for a couple, like the sports network, not the regular CBS Sports Network, which not a lot of people have. You've got a couple matches on Twitch for the American fans, which is cool, but I feel like the three different platforms for all of that is going to be a turnoff to some people and a little bit confusing.
My big gripe about it is the handful of matches and playoffs being locked behind CBS Sports Network, which is a cable channel that's not even available in most cable packages. Like you can't get it in a lot of places, even if you want to pay for it. That's the bit that frustrates me. Paramount Plus doesn't frustrate me. It's not a bad platform, even though, yes, it's a paywall. But yeah, having that cable network, no other option, and depending on where you live, you might not even have it as an option. That's just super frustrating, and I don't think that that's a good way to grow the game. Thankfully, today's Challenge Cup final, that pretty exciting match with the penalty shootout at the end, that was on proper CBS. On the regular broadcast, you can get it over antenna and everything for free. That's cool. I'd like to see more of that. It's just so frustrating to see, oh, hey, half the people who would want to watch this can't get this channel, CBS Sports Network.
And you have a couple matches that are on CBS proper throughout the season. It's like, Portland's playing Kansas City on CBS, and you have, Orlando and Houston that are playing each other, Courage and Gotham, Houston and Portland. But I think that what I find the coolest, truthfully, is that in the playoffs, the championship match is going to be on CBS. Like, that's going to be on that big prime time, just like you mentioned with the Challenge Cup final. And with the big, commercial presence of what CBS is, many people get CBS more than any of the other platforms that they're on. So I think that that's going to help bring something to the sport that otherwise wouldn't bring eyeballs. That just wouldn't necessarily check it out or search for it. They'll just say, oh, women's soccer's on, I'll check it out, because if it's big enough to be on CBS, like the main CBS channel, that gives some credence, some credibility to the sport and to that league that I think will just kind of give that little extra push that wouldn't otherwise be there.
I think it's very similar to hearing about how the Women's Super League over in England will have a proper broadcast deal for a lot more matches in the coming seasons. It makes a difference getting it onto television where people can actually see it, as opposed to, okay, this is going to be on a streaming service, and if you know it's there, you can check it out, and if you don't, well, maybe you'll hear about it on Twitter. You know, people think, well, no one has TV anymore. A lot of people actually do. I mean, you think of it from the point of view of people like us who are connected and online all the time. There are still a huge chunk of people out there who go home and they take the remote control and they click on a television and they go to a channel and they watch what's on it. And, you know, you got to put stuff there for them to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cord cutters, if you will, but still tens of millions of people still have those cable subscriptions, and CBS is definitely one that is on, I mean, almost all cable subscription packages. It's like that's just a core channel, and that's, like you said earlier, one of the ones that you can get on an antenna. You don't even need a cable subscription to get CBS.
Yeah, network CBS is extremely common, so it's great to see some of the bigger matches being able to be accessible that way for free over the air.
Yeah, and so guys, we appreciate you checking out the podcast with us and sticking around. This is going to be a more consistent thing for us. It's going to be, we'll bring on some more exciting things other than just the two of us talking, but anything that you want to chat with us about, comment on, if we pronounced some names wrong or had some bad takes, hit us up. We're on Twitter at DFS Pod. That is Discord Football Server Pod there. We've got both of our personal Twitter accounts linked as well, so feel free to yell at us there as well. But we're just really excited to just get this going, and it's always going to be a consistent. We're going to talk men's football. We're going to talk women's football. People, as you said earlier, people will talk about us, it being different sports or different whatever, but it's not how I feel. I feel it's, I love the game of soccer. I love the game of football. It doesn't matter who's playing it. It doesn't matter what's, what gender, anything is behind it. I'm a fan and I'm here for it. And I think that both leagues, both types of, games that are played between the men's and the women's needs to be talked about on same equal footing there. So we're always going to be bringing you some good coverage of the men's and women's side.
Definitely in agreement with that. I'm happy to be here and be a part of it. There was a video I saw actually on Twitter, which is kind of playing into that. I think you've probably seen it as well. The clubs in, I think it was South America, they were saying the women's season was going to be canceled. And so some of the men's clubs, they took the crest from the kits and actually tore it in half and had the men's team wear one half and the women's team wear the other to sort of illustrate it's one club, one passion. And I like that take on the sport, no matter whether you enjoy one more than the other, whether you really only follow one and, just sort of, the other is on your periphery. Either way, as long as you can have respect for all sorts of the game and all ways the game is played and all the people and fans that are involved in the game, that's absolutely having that passion for it.
The passion, if it exists on one side, needs to exist on that other side, because we're all talking about the same game. We're all talking about the beautiful game, the sport that we all love, and that's just really what it is. People, professional players in men's and women's don't. Like it's their love, it's their passion. They're not doing it just for a paycheck, because in a lot of regards, some of these players aren't making that much, So it's really it's supporting people playing the game that you like in helping have an outlet for their passion and be able to provide some entertainment to anybody everywhere of any style of person, no matter who you are. We're here for it, and we're going to support it wholly. So we hope to have you jump back on and check us out for future podcasts. We're going to be expanding the platform a little bit. This first episode is going to be on Patreon and YouTube. It'll be for free on Patreon. It'll be on our Discord Football Server Patreon page, but it'll be free for all. You don't have to subscribe. Here in the future, we're going to have it, through normal podcast platforms on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, so on. So be on the lookout for that. And again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DFS Pod.